Welcome, Christina, to the conversations on collective well-being. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you for taking the time. So I'm going to go straight into our first question. Could you introduce yourself and tell us about your work as it relates to collective well-being?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Christina Kwauk, and I am the founder and director of Kwauk and Associates and the research director at Unbounded Associates. We're all small women-owned companies that focus on global education issues. And my work in particular, I'm a social scientist by training, and my specialization is in the intersections of gender, education, and climate change. So we work to support nonprofits, governments, foundations, a whole host of different actors that are interested and realize the need to build climate resilience and collective well-being in the time of climate crisis through education. So my work has, while well-being itself might not be the center of what we're looking at or what we do, it ultimately intersects with it, because when we're talking about the climate crisis and sort of the disproportionate impact it has on historically marginalized populations around the world, we're essentially talking about the ability for people and communities to be able to live their full potential and achieve well-being and a quality of life. So our work attempts to help support that through education.
Absolutely. The climate change issue is a well-being issue. So you really
Yeah.
are at the center of it. My second question, as we've been interviewing folks, and just like as you alluded to the fact that collective well-being does not have one definition, and you just said, even though my work is not centered on collective well-being, it contributes to collective well-being. And that's what we're hearing. People have different definitions of what collective well-being means. And we're hearing that folks are trying to close the divide, that divide of, or the perceived divide, and silos in the collective well-being work. To remedy this issue, stakeholders are seeking opportunities for interconnection and mutual understanding. In your work, you are building cross-sector connections. What types of tools, skills, and opportunities do you see as necessary to increase connection across sectors and specializations?
Yeah, that's such a hard thing because, I mean, like I said before, I work on the climate crisis, or work on issues around the climate crisis. And the climate crisis is a systems issue, but the way that our sort of systems and institutions and organizations and our careers are typically structured is that they are oftentimes in silos, and we work on one issue that we hope will address a bigger piece, but then we want to stay in our lanes, and all these different challenges that come in through structures. So what I've found to be particularly useful, or at least the place that I typically start with, is around setting common definitions and common terminology. Because when we're talking across sectors, or we're talking across silos, oftentimes there is a need for code switching, and not only speaking the same language, and many times, or at least using terms that imply and connote the same sorts of things, is also understanding what's at stake, what are the priorities, what are the assumptions, what's the paradigm, the underlying paradigm that's driving the way that people from different sectors look at their issues. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing with my team lately is around, like, how do we set the common starting point so that we break down silos, we encourage more systems oriented thinking in the work that we're doing, and then create those collaboration opportunities to happen, and not just oh, we know that this particular work intersects with that sector, and at some point we need to bring them in, but it's like, no, we have to co-design and co-understand the problems and the solutions together. And so we work on developing frameworks so that you know, we start to identify the problems that we're trying to address around collective well-being from the very get-go, where we're thinking about it from cross-sectoral perspectives, and we're understanding what are the threats, what are the risks, what are the problems from that more systematic approach or systems approach. And then, you know, thinking about, well, what are the actions that could be taken? Who needs to be involved in those actions? What new people or new organizations or new institutions or new ways of doing things do we need to consider in order to really effectively and transformatively make change, and so on. So it's like, really trying to think about those frameworks that open up thinking, but then also in many ways too, it's about defining terms. Again, going back to defining terms. One of the things that we've found to be really useful in kind of addressing the need to address or getting more actors to think about climate change and education is by drawing on lessons learned from the girls' education field, as an example, and how the girls' education field over many decades had to align different types of action and different frameworks for designing programs and different kinds of interventions, and looking at how they evolved their terminology so that it was very clear that in order to achieve gender equality through education, we needed to transform underlying harmful stereotypes and norms and roles and practices, and not just say, we need to make sure we include girls, or make sure we need to, there was, this continuum of approaches, and solidifying language around that really helped to clarify for actors who are not typically in education or not typically working on issues of or gender, to like understand, okay, if we want to address this problem, here are the different ways to think about it, and here's the language to then use to help design interventions. And so a similar thing with the work in education and climate change. It's understanding what's that broad spectrum of action, what are the common ways of talking about it, how does that then shape the way we identify solutions, and so on. And so, common terminology, common frameworks for systems thinking, all of these I think are really critical to help enable more cross-sectoral collaboration and action, and just even discussions.
Thank you so much. Hands-on, minds-on learning. I have to say, I've never heard the minds-on, so I'm going to start using it. Thank you so much, Christina.